Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Parenting Hour. You're tuned into Unity FM 93.5 here in the West Midlands and 105.1 if you're tuned into us on Inspire FM in Luton and Milton Keynes. Welcome to this evening's show, inshallah. You're all well after a busy Ramadan and Eid, inshallah. Your families have gained from this experience, spiritually wise, physically wise, emotionally wise, inshallah, that will keep us all, inshallah, in tune for the next few weeks and months, that we'll be able to keep up our learning from this Ramadan, inshallah, to bring forward into this year, inshallah. We have a very interesting show this evening with a very young doctor that's coming to talk to us about vaccinations. It is a pre-recorded show and we are not able to take live questions. However, if you ring in the studio and have a question, do ring in on 0121 772 8892 and leave your question with the studio manager and we will get back to you. We will make sure that we do answer any questions or queries that you might have. So with that, I just want to invite Dr. Zoyah to come this evening to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for a lovely introduction. So my name's Dr. Zoyah Hussain. I'm a salaried GP in the north of England. Actually, I work in Airedale, Wharfdale and Craven for Modality Group of Practices. So those of you that are based in the West Midlands, you may have heard of Modality because we do have a division in Birmingham and Walsall. So Modality is a super partnership of doctors. My division in the north is called AWC, Airedale, Wharfdale and Craven. We are 8 practices with 3 branch sites and we cover 85,000 patients.
Oh, mashallah. That's a lot of patients that you're seeing, indeed, 85,000. It's good that you have a big practice to be able to do that. Very busy site. And of course, you have lots with those patients. You have lots of children, of course. And we're talking about children immunizations this evening, mashallah, which is really good. I should tell you that Dr. Zoyah has also been shortlisted for the BIMA Awards recently, mashallah, in the Rising Star category. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you for that. Yeah, it was a great privilege and honor to be recognized.
Yeah, it is because there were so many people on the night to actually be shortlisted is amazing, absolutely amazing. So your work must be really great, what you do and how you do it, which we're going to find out about it indeed this evening, inshallah. And also you were featured on the Sunday Times.
Yeah, yes, that was most recently. So the Sunday Times did an article about measles, and they mentioned the work that I've done locally, and we've also been in the BBC News as well, and I'm speaking to the Daily Mail this week actually as well. So yes, we're getting some national recognition for the work that we're doing, and not just the BIMA Awards, but if the work's also been shortlisted for several other national awards, including the GP Awards. I actually won the GP Future Leader of the Year award, and we were a finalist in 3 other categories as well.
MashaAllah, mashallah, mashallah. A credit to your hard work and everything you do. So we want to hear about that this evening, the work that you do, the successes you have, the reasons we're talking about vaccinations in the first place. So maybe we start in the very beginning, about vaccinations and children and what type of vaccinations do they have and why.
Yeah. So, as your listeners might be aware, there's the National Immunisation Programme, which has been going on for decades now, and it's a series of immunisations that are delivered at different stages of a child's childhood, really, if you think of it that way. And the first lot of immunisations happen at 6 to 8 weeks. So those are the ones that you might be familiar with. And your child will typically get 3 different jabs, or vaccination, should we call them, and an oral rotavirus vaccination as well. And I talk about three, but actually, if you look at what the subcomponents of those injections are, and they are covering a range of different conditions, some that you may have heard of, some that you might never have heard of. So things like diphtheria, tetanus, polio, meningitis, measles, mumps, and rubella, the other ones, and like I mentioned, rotavirus. So that there's lots of different diseases that over time, medicine and the NHS has found vaccinations for. And I think just taking a moment now to discuss what vaccination is this really important. So a vaccination is a weakened or dead form of the virus or disease. So it's actually a form that's not going to make you unwell when it goes into your body. It's not going to cause you to become unwell with said disease, but there's enough there for your body to then produce its own cells and create a memory of that, and then use those cells. So if you were then to be exposed to said virus disease,
Mhm.
then your body is able to fight it much faster and generate a faster immune response. So I think this is one area that there's a lot of misconception or we get confused about. Is actually what are we putting inside our children? And that's the question that mums or parents might be worried about. What's actually inside it? So like I said, it's a weakened or dead form. So it stimulates your body to fight that disease or virus, so that next time round, if your body was to be exposed to it, you will be able to clear it much quicker. You're less likely to become unwell, suffer, serious complications, or become very unwell and you need to hospital admission, or even potentially, some of these conditions have been fatal in the past. So it's important to be aware of what's in it and why is it there.
Mm.
And um, everything in the NHS is evidence-based. So we have to make sure what we're delivering, there's value in it for the patients and the NHS service. So it has to be effective for us to deliver it. And I think it's also key to remember that all the vaccinations have gone through rigorous testing.
Mhm.
So nothing is experimental on your child unless you're joining a pilot. None of the immunizations in the immunization program are pilots or administered without having had, evidence-based rigorous trials and testing. I like to give a personal example saying MMR was established in 1988, and that's longer than I've been alive. And if there was going to be, significant reactions or adverse effects, then if you think of that, that's over 30 years. I'm giving away my age now. But that, if there was there number of children that are being immunized, it would become apparent because there is the UK Health Security Agency, which is monitoring any side effects, any adverse experiences. So everything is evidence-based and rigorously followed and checked. So what you are giving to your child is safe.
And that's important, and we'll probably come into that in a little bit more detail
Mm.
later on. But we recently we're based here in Birmingham, and this show is going out to the West Midlands, and we've heard about the rise of measles. Is it because you think that people don't know that it is safe, or what goes on in people's minds that they are opting out of being vaccinated or vaccinating their children, especially for something like measles that, as you say, have been around for, the vaccination been there for years.
Yeah, I think it's multifactorial, really. And unfortunately, COVID and COVID vaccinations have a lot to answer for, and the misconceptions that are out there in the news and media. So what we need to remember is the duration, like I was alluding to earlier. These measles and MMR and the diphtheria, tetanus, polio vaccinations have all been around for a long time. So there's lots of reasons why parents might not want to have their child vaccinated. And one thing that they might be thinking about I've mentioned what's inside the vaccine, but there is porcine products in some of the vaccinations. However, there are non-porcine injections available, particularly for the measles, mumps, and rubella. You have a right to ask, or before or at your practice nurse appointment, about what's in your vaccination. Is it halal? Is it Muslim friendly? You can also, with the flu jab, it is available. The nasal flu jab has porcine products in it. If you go for the injection flu jab, although yes, it might be more discomfort for your child, it's actually likely to work better by having the IM rather than the nasal flu. The body's absorption is much better with an intramuscular injection, and that not only is it's more halal
Mhm.
or halal friendly or Muslim friendly, it is actually more clinically effective as well. And there are, different schools of thought. Some schools of thought include that when you're unwell or if it's for health benefit, then porcine products for a health benefit might be considered acceptable. If you think about it, some capsules that you might take as a regular medication could have porcine products. If you're in hospital and you've got a prolonged hospital stay, the tinzaparin injection, which they give you to stop your blood clotting, also has porcine products in it. So sometimes we're not aware of what's in our product. We can always ask. Pharmacists are really good for approaching for that, or your doctor and your medical practice is the other option. So I just thought it was worth reminding listeners about what's in our products and how can we make sure that it's aligning with our views and beliefs. I'm also aware that in Scotland there's a fatwa and a school of thought that thinks actually, because it's given for a health reason, it's acceptable, but that's down to you and your individual choice, really. Uh,
Good. It's good that we parents are made aware of this because they can go and find out, they can go and ask, they can go and ask their scholars, they can go and make an informed decision.
mm,
As you said, yes, it's in a lot of medication that we don't often think about. I remember when I found out about this, having to go and ask about something that I was on some small medication. What was the capsule contained it, and it can be changed around too. As you say, there's lots of Muslim friendly halal options now. We just need to be made aware of it and take responsibility and look out for that ourselves. I think the main point you're getting across here is that vaccinations are important, and we shouldn't be just putting across through it and say, because I heard something, that no, I'm not getting vaccinated, because that could be have risk to your own children and other children. Is that right? Is that what I'm
yes,
picking up? Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And I think what we forget, and I think over time you might not have heard of what diphtheria is. You might not be aware of. You might not know what measles does to a body and how it makes a child unwell. And I think the reason why we don't know is because these conditions were once eradicated it. So even in the UK in 2017 and 2021, we had achieved the World Health Organization status of having eradicated measles. So that means nobody was catching measles or becoming unwell for it. And that was because of the immunity, because there was a sufficient uptake of the vaccination to protect not only those that have had it, but there are certain children or members of society who, for some reason and for certain health conditions, they can't have that vaccination. So by having your child vaccinated, you're not only protecting your children, you're also providing a degree of protection to those in your community who, for some reason, can't have that vaccination. So that's called herd immunity. Sadly, the UK has now lost that status, and measles is prevalent. And you might have heard in end of January, February, London has had an outbreak of measles. Children have become severely unwell with it. Last summer, there was the death of a child with measles in Liverpool. These things were completely unheard of. Nobody was getting very unwell with measles or dying from the condition because we had eradicated through successful immunization program. And now that more children and more parents are making the decision not to have the vaccinations, these conditions are coming back and rising again. Um,
Really difficult, isn't it? And often because they're confused, and we've had lots of talk about vaccinations. I remember one of the last times we did a show on this, somebody rang in about a COVID vaccination, which we weren't talking about. We were talking about vaccination for children. But it just shows that people do get confused because it's kind of all put into the same box, and they don't understand what it means.
Yeah. And I think the other thing we can think of is you might be thinking, well, my child had immunizations at 6 weeks. Now you're calling them back 3 months later. Now you're calling them back at 12 months, 18 months. Then just before they start school, why are they constantly having all these jabs? What is it for? And that's the reason why is the different injections cover different conditions. Some
Mhm.
conditions require a boost after a certain period of time to make sure that your body has enough of its own immune response to be able to fight that condition. So yes, they may have had a measles vaccination at 1 year, but why do they need it again? And that's the reason why is because there isn't sufficient exposure at one injection cause a sufficient enough immune response for your baby, for your body to be able to fight it successfully. So
Mhm.
that is why there are a series
Mhm.
of injections, and the age is important. So often we think, oh, our child is very young, or a reason I get from parents is my child is still very small. Do they really need all this when they're still so tiny? And I think that's the key thing to think about is that yes, they are very small. They are very, very vulnerable. Their immune system hasn't developed fully. And that is why we're trying to give them the protection when they need it, when they're very young, rather than waiting till they're, 7, 8, 9, 10, when the immune system has developed.
Mhm.
So the reason why it's given so young is so that when they are the most vulnerable, they are able to have a bit of an immune response to fight said condition or disease.
Mm. And what would happen if, that letter came through the door, or maybe now it's different to a letter through the door. My date was letter through the door. Maybe now it's text or message or some sort of an app that tells parents to go for the vaccine. If they were, away at that time or on holidays, or if their child was ill, like the day beforehand, their child got ill and had a temperature, what should parents do in that case?
So you can always rearrange, rebook. It's better to contact your surgery or practice and let them know that your child can't make it or you can't make it, rather than letting that appointment get wasted and then, somebody else could have used that slot. If your child has a sniffle, a cold, runny nose, otherwise they are well with no temperature, they can still have their immunizations. So having a cold does not mean that your child can't have the immunizations. And I think sometimes we get confused and we think, oh, they just seem a bit under the weather. I won't give it to them now. But ideally, unless they are significantly unwell with a fever on antibiotics, then yes, it can be delayed, and we can reschedule or schedule it in advance. So in a couple of weeks' times, children are very resilient, and often illnesses last a short period of time, so a matter of days, never generally longer than a week. So you can reschedule for the following week. You can also, there is no harm in picking up the phone, filling out your online form, just to clarify where you are. Sometimes young parents are busy and you can forget and you're not sure where are they due, have they had it, have they not? So you can always contact your practice and clarify. The other way of checking is looking in the red book. So if you have your red book to hand, you can check on that. Your health visitor can advise you. If you have a local family hub, you can pop in there. Somebody will be able to advise you there. But ultimately, if you want access to the medical record, it has to be a health professional or contact your surgery. No surgery is too busy to answer a query about immunizations or child health.
Which is wonderful indeed. And if we're starting and talking about child health and immunizations, maybe it would be useful to go through the different ones because they seem to be a lot of ones from the very beginning, from firstborn baby right up to school going age and even longer. Like there's some now that they get in the school when they're a bit older and teenagers. So there's a lot of vaccinations there, and I know we don't want to overwhelm our listeners, but maybe if we could section it off into baby,
Yeah.
preschool, and section it that way.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm happy to go through it. And there's lots of changes. And I think it's also important to remember that over time, um, with all the research and the evidence coming in, there are modifications to what happens when do we still need this? You might be aware that recently in January, chickenpox was added to the MMR vaccine. So it's now called MMRV. So it means that children that are due the schedule at 12 months now and 18 months, they will be protected against chickenpox. The chickenpox, most parents are familiar with. You might have heard of it. You might recall having it yourself as a child. And with all the advances in science, we're now able to offer vaccination with chickenpox as part of the national immunization program. Before, in years gone by, you were able to get that done privately. And now there's sufficient evidence that it's worthwhile doing on the NHS. So that's a new introduction. But yes, I'm happy to go through. So like I mentioned, 6 to 8 weeks, typically 8 weeks is the first lot of immunizations that a child will have. And I mentioned there's three main ones. So the first one is called the 6-in-1. So it covers 6 conditions. So those are diphtheria, tetanus, whooping cough or pertussis, you might have heard it being called, polio, and H influenza B and hepatitis B. And that's an injection that goes into the thigh. And then a separate injection at 8 weeks is the meningitis B. And then you get the oral injection, which is called the rotavirus, and that protects against rotavirus, which can cause gastroenteritis, the stomach bug. So those are the first lot. And then at 12 weeks, you get the 6-in-1 booster again. So that's the diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis / whooping cough, polio, H influenza B, and hepatitis B again. And then you get your booster for the meningitis B, and then you get your rotavirus again. And then at 16 weeks, you get the 6-in-1 again. So it's the 3-part booster. So again, it covers the same 6 conditions I mentioned before: diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, which is whooping cough, polio, H influenza B, so that's the flu, and hepatitis B. You also at 16 weeks get the pneumococcal, which is the injection in the thigh. At 1 year, you get your first measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. And now, since January this year, you get chickenpox, which is incorporated in that single vaccination. And then you get your meningitis B again, and you get your pneumococcal, which is pneumonia. And then you get to have a bit of a break. And this is where the new changes are. The immunization schedule has changed slightly since 2024. So those at 18 months, if you're born after the 1st of July, you will get your diphtheria, tetanus, hepatitis B, H influenza, and then your measles, mumps, and rubella, and the first lot of chickenpox vaccination. If you were born before or after the 30th of June 24, you won't get an appointment. And this is because of the change that's been brought in with the MMR and chickenpox. And the reason why it's been brought in is that we found that uptake wasn't as great at 1 year and later on. So they've brought it in a bit earlier, 18 months. So that might be new to those with older children. And then the last of the childhood vaccination is at 3 year, 4 months. So the reason why it happens at that age is because at 4 years, some children, those that are born in the older part of the year, they might be starting school. So this is to protect children before they start school. And then you cover, like I said, the first lot of 6-in-1, which is diphtheria, tetanus, polio, whooping cough, and then you get your measles, mumps, and rubella and chickenpox again. And that is the last one of the under 10s immunizations. So if you, like I was alluding to before, all of it is focused at the very young age of childhood, the initial from 8 weeks to 3 years. And that is because that age is the most vulnerable. We know that the biggest spike in measles is around 3 to 5 years. So if they are going to catch it, that is the age they're going to catch it.
Thank you so much for summarizing all that. There is a lot there. I can see how parents do get confused, a lot to learn. But as you said, the early years, the babies, the right up to the early years, is so important to get that done so that the protection is in there. And you mentioned the measles is most common between the ages of 3 and 5. So we do want to protect our children. After the break, we can come back and ask about some of the other vaccinations for the older children, inshallah. But listeners, we are going into a commercial break. So please do join us after this commercial break, inshallah.